pull up. They all on me like they want some. Think I got what you need, well I have none. Hop off, you're a freak and I'm handsome. Slide up in the club like 2 chains. This snake is on top of the food chain. Stand out like a star, no new name. All these threats in my DMs, no message back, I just see them. I get them hooked and I reel it down, throw them back, we complete. I'm a snake on this lane, I'm speeding my poison, I'm trying to handle that. I'm late for pain, we dripping in venom, so baby, I'm a V-I-P-E. Natural selection, never hugs or connections. I just constrict and reject them. I make my snake hole transactions, eject my papers and stack them. All these words and my DMs, no message back, I just see them. I get them hooked and I reel it down, throw them back when completed. I'm a snake on this lane, I'm spitting my poison, it's rain, I'm handling the holy the pain, we drinking the venom, so baby, I'm a V-I-P-E.
Everyone! May hinahanap kami.
Naghahanap kami ng bagong teacher, Bibal.
Kailangan namin ng mga bibong guro na mahilig makipag-interact at hindi camera shy.
Game na game din sa challenges para mas maging fun and fantastic ang learning experience ng mga bata.
Kaya kung ikaw ay isang licensed professional teacher and with pleasing personality, we want you!
Mag-upload lamang ng inyong pinaka-creative na TikTok video. Pwede ninyong i-promote ang inyong city or hometown o i-discuss ang paborito ninyong lesson na makikita sa alinmang Bibal textbooks. Huwag kalimutang itag o isama sa caption ang @TikTok Paaralan at ang hashtag na #TeacherBibal.
Madali lang, di ba? At kahit na ano pa ang edad, kasarian o lahing pinanggalingan, welcome na welcome kayo sumali!
Kaya don't miss the chance! Samahan kami sa mas exciting new season ng Teacher Bibal!
Hihintayin namin kayo!
Good day, Kavibal, and welcome to our YouTube webinar series. For the discussion today, the topic will be on encouraging students' emotional growth and dealing with stress during hybrid learning. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are wearing a mask and using a microphone properly. Please ensure that your camera is on and that your audio is working. Use the #LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to all our Vibal webinars. Experience learning Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker today. Aaron Luis Buduan is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Psychology, Guidance and Counseling stream in the Philippine Normal University, Manila as cum laude, currently taking up Master of Arts in Counseling at the same university. He is a previous guidance associate and senior high school faculty in Paco Catholic School and currently a senior high school faculty member in Adamson University. He has conducted a few webinars about students and teachers' well-being, particularly their mental health aspect in few public and private schools in Metro Manila. In his spare time, he usually travels and goes out with his friends to distress and take care of his mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Mr. Aaron Luis C. Duan.
Good day, Vibal teachers. So I am here once again to deliver a very timely and a very relevant topic that we should be talking about nowadays, most especially for the next school year, wherein a lot of schools and a lot of institutions or educational institutions will be shifting from distance learning to hybrid learning. So as you can see po on your screens, what we will be talking about is all about encouraging student emotional growth and dealing with daily stress during hybrid learning. So this is a very important topic because as we all know, we are transitioning, like what I've mentioned a little earlier, from distance learning to hybrid learning. So later on, we will be differentiating what is distance learning. We will be reviewing ano nga po ba ang definition natin way back regarding distance learning, and we will also be dealing or we will also be giving definition as to what hybrid learning is really all about. Okay, so once again, teachers, ma'ams and sirs, we are going to focus our topic for this webinar regarding our students' emotional growth and how to deal with their daily stressors. So we will be shedding light in terms of this topic through the different objectives that we need to accomplish toward the end of this webinar. So those are the objectives that we are going to accomplish or that we are aiming to finish toward the end of our discussion for this webinar. First, defining mental health. So we are going to shed light as to what mental health is really all about. And aside from defining mental health, second objective is understanding hybrid learning this pandemic. So once again, we are going to differentiate distance learning versus hybrid learning through our webinar for today. Third objective is identifying factors that demotivate students during distance learning or online learning. So we're going to identify factors that greatly affected how students became demotivated. Once again, how did they become demotivated during distance learning or online learning? Fourth objective, reinforcing teachers' role in terms of hybrid learning. So as teachers po, ano nga po ba ang ating role? What are the do's and don'ts in terms of our responsibilities for this hybrid learning? So we're also going to discuss how are we going to reinforce your roles as teachers in terms of this hybrid learning. And the last objective po, ma'ams and sirs, helping students develop a healthy mindset in hybrid learning. So these are very concise and precise objectives that we need to accomplish toward the end of our discussion for this webinar. So, backtrack lang po tayo, no? Once again, the topic of our webinar for today is all about encouraging students' emotional growth and dealing with daily stressors during hybrid learning. All right? So, before we formally start discussing hybrid learning, let's have a quick background lang po, no? Magbalik tanaw tayo in terms of the pandemic. When did it start or how did it start? And how did it become a challenge for our country, not just for the Philippines, no, but how did it become a challenge for all nations across the globe? So let's have a quick review of what is the pandemic as the current challenge. All right. So when did COVID-19 first emerge? So obviously, when COVID-19 first emerged, we cannot believe that this is, or wala po sa isip natin that COVID, ang una pang tawag sa kanya ay NCOV. If you can remember po, no, ma'am and sirs, ang unang tawag po natin sa COVID-19 ay NCOV. And when we first heard NCOV, um, let's admit it, no, hindi natin ito itinake or hindi natin siya tinake as a pandemic at first. It's because it only first started to emerge in China. So we cannot believe that COVID turned into this pandemic and affected a lot of nations throughout our globe. So COVID-19, so backtrack lang tayo. When we talk about COVID-19, this is an acronym that stands for Corona. Okay? Corona. V is for virus and D is for disease. 19, obviously, it represents the date or the year that this virus was first identified. So COVID-19, this is a virus that has become a great challenge in terms of every nation that we have here in our globe. And of course, in the Philippines, it greatly affected a lot of people, a lot of, if not all, most of the people here in our country were greatly affected by this virus. Okay? And in terms of COVID-19, no, in the Philippines, we are already in the second year of the pandemic. It started last March 2020. That was the first month wherein lockdowns were imposed. Tranche of financial assistances were given by the government. And of course, in those 2 years po, teachers, if we can recall everything that happened in those 2 years, a lot of things happened already. One, numerous lockdowns. Okay, so very obvious naman po, no? Sobrang daming lockdowns na po ang nangyari sa ating bansa. Currently po, no, the Philippines has the longest streak in terms of imposing lockdowns. Other countries are now, uh, have now get rid of those lockdowns, those alert levels. And of course, in the Philippines, we are still the country that has the longest lockdowns, the longest alert systems, or the longest levels of quarantine that we have nowadays. So aside from numerous lockdowns po, changing of systems, dati ang tawag natin lockdowns, ang tawag na natin as current, with the current situation, we call it alert levels. So, if you know the differences between the lockdowns and alert levels, that's good for you teachers. No? So once again, changing of systems from lockdowns to alert levels. So in those 2 years din po, no, vaccines were already produced. A lot of us are already vaccinated. A lot of the frontliners have been vaccinated already. If I'm not mistaken, we are already meeting in terms of the goal of our government to have at least 70% of the population to be vaccinated. Okay, so aside from adults, children are already vaccinated as well. Sometime during the earlier months of this year, no, a lot of kids have been vaccinated already. A lot of teenagers were able to receive the vaccines already. Minimal face-to-face transactions also happen. It also happened na because of this vaccines, dahil po sa mga bakuna na ating nakuha, no, restrictions decreased over time. Minimal face-to-face transactions happened. Nowadays, no, we are already in the sixth month of 2022. A lot of schools have already conducted their face-to-face graduations. Some schools will follow in a few weeks or so. So it is good that we are already returning or going back to what is the old normal before the pandemic started. But still, we are in this current challenge that the pandemic is still present. COVID-19 is still present. Lagi po nating tatandaan na hindi pa po tapos ang pandemic. We are still in this pandemic, so we have to be very careful pa rin po in terms of our actions, in terms of going out, so that we cannot catch this virus. Okay, so with this being said, teachers, like what I have mentioned a little earlier, pandemic is still a current challenge for our country. And of course, this pandemic gave or produced a lot of negative effects in terms of our society. So let's discuss these negative effects of the pandemic in terms of our country. Okay, so these are the five major negative effects of of the pandemic in terms of our country: job loss, businesses closing, schools closing, low to no income, psychological problems. Okay, so job loss, very obvious. When the pandemic started, okay, marami pong nawalan ng trabaho because a lot of establishments closed. A lot of establishments and businesses halted their operations. It is quite related to the second negative effect, businesses closing. Ang dami pong pinadapang mga businesses ng pandemic na ito, and currently, no, although a lot of businesses are able to catch up at present time, still marami pa rin pong businesses ang talo because of this pandemic. Okay? Job loss, no? Unemployment rates soared very high during this pandemic. So we can say that this is really a negative impact of the pandemic in terms of our country. Okay? Schools closing. A lot of private schools have closed because of the decline in terms of the enrollment. And because of that, a lot of teachers lost their jobs as well. Okay? They have contributed in terms of the rising unemployment rate that has happened because of the pandemic. So, schools closing, no, mostly private. Of course, dahil wala nga po masyado nag-enroll, this was brought upon by the parents or the guardians losing their job also because of the pandemic. Okay? Low to no income. Very obvious because kapag wala po tayong trabaho, of course, wala po tayong income, wala pong gaanong pwedeng maging budget for the basic necessities, wala pong pwedeng maging budget for enrolling our kids in terms of the private schools or the private institutions. And of course, those are the domino effect. No, this first four effects or negative effects of the pandemic has been a domino effect. Okay, job loss, of course, brought upon by businesses closing. Therefore, families have low to no income, and therefore, children. Children cannot enroll in schools. That is another negative effect of this pandemic po, teachers. Ang dami pong students ang hindi nakapag-continue ng kanilang studies. Ang dami pong students ang hindi nakapag-continue ng kanilang pag-aaral. And of course, the very evident effect of this pandemic is this what we call psychological problems. Sobrang evident naman po, teachers, ma'ams and sirs, that a lot of people, not just students, if I'm going to think of it very carefully, some of you, ma'ams and sirs, have also experienced psychological distress, psychological problems brought upon by this pandemic. So that is one negative effect of this pandemic to our society. And of course, when we talk about psychological problems for teachers, in sensors, we are dealing with this what we call mental health. And this is a very sensitive topic to talk about nowadays, especially here in our country, that mental health is still a topic that a lot of people try to avoid. All right, but like what I have mentioned po in terms of my previous webinar, mental health is very important as our physical health. That's why it is very important that we should also take care of this aspect of our totality as a person. This aspect of mental health should also be taken care of. Okay, so defining mental health. This definition is according to the World Health Organization, and it defined mental health as a state of well being in which an individual realizes his or her abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and can make a contribution to his or her community. And if we are going to dissect this definition of mental health features, this is a very much concise definition of mental health because one, ability of a person to realize his or her abilities. That's one of our goal as a person, for us to know what are the capabilities that we have, what are the talents that we have, what are the abilities that we possess. Of course, as a person po, that is part of our mental health. Second, can cope with the normal stresses of life. Like what I have mentioned a little earlier, this pandemic became one of our stressors. And in terms of our mental health, a lot of people suffered greatly or gravely because of this psychological problems that they have experienced because of the stressors brought upon by this pandemic. And of course, that is one aspect of our mental health. we can say that our mental health is okay if we can cope with the normal stressors or the daily stresses of our lives. Okay, can work productively as a person. You have to assess your performance. Are you effective? Are you productive as a professional, as a person? Sa mga students naman natin, nakakapagpasa ba kayo ng mga requirements on time? Are you able to participate in terms of classroom discussions for the teachers naman po? Are you able to meet the deadlines that you have set for your students? Are you able to meet the deadlines set by your supervisors? So those are okay. Are you or were you able to be productive in terms of your work? So you have to ask those questions among yourselves in order for you to assess if you can work productively, because this is a part of our mental health. And of course, the very last aspect of this definition of mental health is can make a contribution to his or her community. As an individual po, you should be able to contribute in the littlest way possible po, in the least way possible. Pwede na po yun, no? If we can contribute to our community, therefore we can say that we have a good or a healthy mental health aspect. Okay, like what I have mentioned a little earlier po, teachers, this is the aspect of us as persons or as people, na sobrang affected because of this pandemic. Alright, that's why nagkakaroon tayo ng psychological stresses, psychological problems, or psychological distress. And of course, hindi rin po iba dito, or most especially po, no, our students. Okay? Sila po yung isa sa mga pinakatinamaan ng mga psychological distresses brought upon by this pandemic. And not just psychological distress, no? Let's talk about the effects of the pandemic for our students. So, mamaya po, isang tabi po muna natin sa mental health. So, in a general perspective, ano nga po ba yung naging effects nitong pandemic na ito in terms of our students? Okay? Generally speaking po, teachers, when we talk about the effects of this pandemic for our students or to our students, okay? Some of them are idolizing BTS. Okay? If you can assess teenagers or younger generations nowadays, no, they are very well knowledgeable in terms of this different Korean pop groups. If not Korean pop groups, no, Korean dramas, Korean stars, Korean actors and actresses, no. So we do have some of the famous people here that you can see on your screens. We have BTS. We also have Twice, EXO, Red Velvet, and of course, one of the most famous Korean pop groups nowadays, Blackpink. So because of this pandemic, no, a lot of students were able to explore their taste in terms of the music that they want to listen to, in terms of the artists that they want to follow, in terms of the idols that they want to patronize as individuals. So these are just some of the positive effects of this pandemic towards our students. Okay? Other effects of this pandemic to our students, teachers. Okay? Kong TV, no? Marami sa mga students natin, they know Kong TV. So if you don't know Kong TV, teachers, no? Kong TV is a YouTuber, a Filipino YouTuber. He started from scratch. As in, galing po siya sa isang mahirap na pamilya, and now, because of YouTube, Kong TV is now a very successful person. Meron siya mga businesses. He earns millions in a month. Okay, so we also have Mimia, a famous TikToker. So si Mimia, no, a lot of our students also, or a lot of kids nowadays, they are very fond of YouTube, TikTok. Okay, so if you're going to ask some of them nga, ano po ang gusto nilang maging paglaki, what profession do they want to have in the near future, some of them, if not most of them, teachers will answer YouTubers, TikTokers, influencers, social media influencers. So because of this digital age, no, the professions that our students want to have in the near future po are also changing. Okay, but some of our students din naman po, if they are not fond of YouTube, if they are not fond of TikTok, binge watching sa Netflix yung isa sa mga pinagkaabalahan nila because of this pandemic. Okay, so others, aside from YouTube, TikTok, Netflix, others turn to online games such as Mobile Legends. Even teachers, no? Some teachers are also playing Mobile Legends. May mga ibang teachers po akong kilala that they are also playing online games to distress, to relieve their stress brought by this pandemic. So not just Mobile Legends, we also have Valorant. So these are just some of the hobbies. That's the right term. Hobbies and interests of our students brought upon or as a result of this pandemic. Okay? And with that being said, no, we can say that hindi lang po negative yung effect ng pandemic in terms of our students, but also they were able to explore their interests. They were able to explore their hobbies as an individual, therefore providing them a greater knowledge or a greater sense of themselves. All right. And of course, because of this pandemic, also teachers, our students, all right, not just our students, not just the teachers, all right, the modality of learning has also been greatly affected. Once again, the modality of learning, the way to deliver the lessons or the lectures were also greatly affected because of this pandemic. And this is what I have mentioned a little earlier, teachers. This is what we call distance learning in this pandemic. Okay, so medyo balik tanaw lang tayo, no? 2020 was the first year of the pandemic. Okay? In the middle of the school year, March 2020, lockdowns were imposed. Of course, schools or most of the schools are not ready of this pandemic. They are not well adept in terms of how they are going to deliver lessons through distance learning. Back then nga po, wala pa po yung concept ng distance learning in the Philippines. It was already present in terms of other countries, but in the Philippines, it is seldomly used, this term distance learning. Okay? And because of that, no choice, but schools have to close the school year earlier than expected last 2020. And of course, because of the pandemic, also teachers, so kung natatandaan po ninyo, we have no choice but to shift our academic calendars way back in 2020. A lot of schools have started their schooling in the month of August. Others started in September. If I'm not mistaken po, public schools have started in last 2020 in the month or with the month of October or November, I guess. And of course, that is when distance learning was introduced to us. Okay, so balik tanaw lang tayo, no? Let's review ourselves. Let's define distance learning. So in terms of distance learning teachers, this is a way of educating students online. Lectures and learning materials are sent over the internet. Students work from home, not in a classroom. So aside from online learning, nagkaroon din po tayo ng tinatawag nating modular approach, which is widely utilized or which was widely utilized in the public school system wherein teachers or the schools provide modules for the students who cannot attend their online classes. So in terms of the distance learning, kaya po siya tinawag na distance learning, even though, let's say for example, no, hindi mo kailangan maging present sa geographic location ng isang lugar para maka-attend ng classes. Okay? I have some students, no, let's say for example, I am also a faculty member po kasi, and I have also started teaching in my current institution during the first year of this what we call distance learning. When we say distance learning po, it is not limited by geography. You don't need to be in the Philippines for you to attend the classes, the online classes that your teachers are conducting. Some of my students are residing in Middle East. Some of my students are residing in USA. Some of them are residing in Europe. So despite the geographic differences, geographic location differences, nakaka-attend sila ng classes because of this what we call distance learning. Okay? And due to this pandemic, because of this pandemic, this was the typical style of teaching utilized by most schools, colleges, and universities during this pandemic, and is now being adopted or has now been adopted by some elementary and high schools and institutions as well. So that is distance learning. And since we are already in 2022 teachers, okay, a lot of us, like what I have mentioned a little earlier, marami na pong nabakunahan sa mga first liners, including teachers. Maski students natin, most of them have already been vaccinated. A lot of schools have already started resuming their minimal face-to-face classes. All right. And with that being said po, there is no stopping in terms of accomplishing or this type of learning to happen. This is what we call hybrid learning. Alright, so hybrid learning is the one that most schools will be the one that most schools will be utilizing at the start of the next school year. So some of the schools, kagaya po na nasabi ko kanina, they may start or some of them are starting in August. Some of them are starting this July, as early as July. Some of them in September, in October, and November. Okay? And most of them will be adapting this what we call hybrid learning. Some schools call this blended learning. Some schools call this blended learning. Some schools call this flexible learning. Okay, some schools call this hybrid learning as it is, as what it is. So there are a lot of terminologies for hybrid learning, but there is this just one concept or there is this just one definition surrounding those different terminologies that fall under this what we call hybrid learning in this pandemic. Okay, so let's define what hybrid learning is. So hybrid learning, this is an educational model where some students attend class in person while others join the class virtually from home. Educators teach remote and in-person students at the same time using tools like video conferencing hardware and software. So, example po. So, kapag sinabi po nating hybrid learning teachers, sabay pong nangyayari, simultaneous. May students tayo sa loob ng classroom, may students tayo sa bahay na nakikinig at nanonood ng ating lectures while there are students inside the classroom. Okay? So let's say for example, no, kunwari po yung school ko magiging hybrid learning na for the next school year. So if we're going to talk about hybrid learning po, let's say for example, in the first week of our school, let's say the maximum capacity for the classroom is 20. So for the first week and the total, let's say for example po, no, ang total number of students ko sa isang class ay 40. Okay? So kung may 20 students po ako sa first week na papasok in person, okay, may physical presence na inside the classroom, yung 20 po ay nasa bahay. And then, those students po na nasa bahay, sila yung tinatawag natin na gumagamit ng video conferencing applications such as Google Meet, such as Zoom, wherein habang may tinuturuan ako sa classroom, tinuturuan ko rin sila, pero sila nasa bahay sila. They are just watching in a remote location. Okay? And after that week has passed, the next week, yung students po from the previous week na nasa bahay, sila naman po yung papasok sa classroom. At yung 20 students na umattend face-to-face classes during the first week, sila naman po yung nasa bahay for the second week. So that is what we mean by hybrid learning. So may in-person students po tayo at the same time. Meron po tayong students attending the classes through video conferencing softwares or applications. Okay, so in some cases po, you have to remember teachers, hybrid learning include asynchronous learning elements. So in the previous po, no, sa distance learning, gumagamit din tayo ng asynchronous classes. We can also utilize asynchronous classes through hybrid learning. So sometimes, kapag medyo may problem sa internet connection, although may students tayo na present in the class, we can still provide pre-recorded lectures to the students who are attending our classes at home. Okay? When well planned, hybrid learning combine the best aspects of in-person or physical or face-to-face classes and online learning while making education more attainable for our students. Okay, traditionally po, no, teachers, before the pandemic, classroom instruction has been teacher-directed. Before the pandemic po, when we are still in the face-to-face classes, Traditional classroom is typically teacher directed, typically top down. Typically one size fits all yung strategies na ginagamit natin way back in the traditional classroom setup. Okay, but with hybrid learning, it now becomes more student focused or student driven, bottom up and customized. All right, with differentiation as our main feature. So once again, now, when we talk about hybrid learning teachers, this is more student driven. This is more kind of a bottom up. This is more kind of a customized learning experience for our students. You also have to remember, teachers, when we talk about hybrid learning, this is an appropriate balance between online instructions, which offers interactive and technology-based learning, and at the same time, individualized pacing and privacy that keep students continuously engaged and motivated. Okay? Through the use of technology po kasi teachers, we can get the interest of our students. We can get their excitement. Mas magiging excited sila with the use of these technologies that we can utilize in terms of this hybrid learning. In terms of hybrid learning, this new type of approach in terms of delivering instructions or providing lessons and lectures, this gives students permission and space, and it gives students more responsibility for them to become active learners in the classroom setup. It's because hybrid learning na po tayo, no? Hindi na tayo traditional classroom setup. We expect our students to become more active. All right. And in terms of hybrid learning, students are working independently. Okay, most of the time po, independent working ang ating students, and at the same time, we as teachers, no, we provide face-to-face support and assistance in terms of the different activities and the different modules, the different, how do we say this, the different programs that we are going to provide them through this, what we call hybrid learning. All right. And lastly, teachers, when we talk about hybrid learning, po, we have to remember because hybrid learning yields more frequent and more personal teacher interaction with students, teachers have the opportunity to deepen and strengthen student-teacher relationships. Pansin niyo po ba, teachers, no, during the online classroom, during the online learning, or the modular learning, or that's what we call distance learning, um, there is less interaction between the student and the teacher. There is less relationship, less understanding, less how do we say this? Less ways to strengthen the relationships between the student and the teacher. And with the help of this what we call hybrid learning po, because meron na tayong in-face or in-person, face-to-face classroom or classes, magkakaroon na po ulit tayo ng opportunity for us to deepen and strengthen the student-teacher relationships. Okay? And in summary, when we talk about hybrid learning teachers, this combines the best aspects of online learning and the best aspects of traditional classroom setup. All right, you have to remember po, teachers, this hybrid learning helps us to easily manage our students' needs without adding an already weighty workload or schoolworks for our students. And this, teachers, ito po yung ating magiging new normal once na pumasok na po ang academic or school year 2022-2023 sa ating mga schools at educational institutions. Okay? And in terms of hybrid learning, teachers, no, once again, a combination of the traditional classroom setup and the online learning setup. And through hybrid learning, we must understand first, why do our students feel demotivated way back the time na tayo ay na humaharap sa distance learning. So, para mas maintindihan natin, teachers, kung ano nga po ba talaga or how should we um, perform hybrid learning, we must understand first Why do our students feel demotivated way back the time that we are still in the distance learning? So this is quite difficult. No, this is very relevant because we need to understand the factors that make them feel demotivated way back in distance learning so that we can avoid exhibiting or allowing those factors to emerge in this what we call hybrid learning. Okay, so way back before the distance learning teachers, ang isa sa mga issues po na kinakaharap ng ating students ay lack of physical space. Okay? Most of our students, wala po silang conducive environment for learning way back in the distance learning period or the distance learning era. Okay? Pansin nyo, teachers, no, when we are still in the traditional classroom setup, alright, there is this distinction pa, kaya pa nating i-distinction or ng mga students, kaya pa nilang i-distinguish ang bahay sa school. But because of the pandemic, all right, because of the pandemic, they have no choice but to make use of their house or their homes as their classroom as well. And therefore, there is this what we call lack of physical space because let's admit it. A lot of students prefer learning with their classmates beside them than learning alone in the online setup. Once again, teachers, alam po natin ito, aware tayo dito that one of the characteristics of our students is that they prefer learning more or they tend to learn a lot with their classmates physically present with them than being alone attending online classes. They feel more motivated when they see their classmates and friends physically rather than virtually. Let us also remember, teachers, that the nature of our students is they want to explore the outside world. They want to experiment on things. They want to experience things. And you have to remember, teachers, schooling years po ng ating mga students, ito po yung pinaka-vulnerable stage na pwede nilang pagdaanan in terms of their entire lives. So this is one of the factors that typically makes students demotivated way back in distance learning. Once again, lack of physical space. Another factor po during the distance learning that makes our students feel demotivated is inconsistency of schedules. For many, all right, for many students, the inconsistency of schedules from teacher to teacher, as well as the different approaches that each teacher takes with their online classroom, can make it difficult to track or to keep track of what is assigned. Another thing, no, some teachers use Google Meet. Some teachers use Zoom. Some teachers use Google Classroom. Some teachers use Blackboard. Some teachers use Canvas. And with these differences po, teachers, no, maaring maka-apekto or maaring maisip ni bata that because of the differences on how teachers deliver their instructions, all right, they feel demotivated to pursue their tasks and assignments. Okay? Mostly teachers, so let's admit it. In public schools, no, there is this what we call inconsistency of schedules. Minsan, hindi natin or hindi alam ni student kung kailan may klase, kung kailan siya dapat pumasok sa meeting room na provided ni teacher. Sometimes naman, inconsistency of schedule. Sometimes naman, modular lang throughout the whole semester or the whole quarter. So this inconsistency of schedules, this has really affected our students' motivation to pursue their responsibilities as a student inside our class. All right. So the third factor, teachers, are subjects are too challenging. There can be many reasons for why children can find certain subjects challenging. This can either be not being naturally strong in a specific area. Baka talagang mahina lang siya in terms of that subject. Okay? Another is having developed gaps in knowledge or perhaps needing more time or practice with specific tasks. Okay? Repeatedly failing to succeed in a certain subject can ultimately develop negative associations with the subject and therefore resulting in no motivation to study at all. Some students, no, hindi sila ganun ka-well knowledgeable in terms of the concepts or the lessons or the lectures that you are delivering. Kaya po, para sa kanila, subjects are too challenging. And of course, kung ako yung student at sa tingin ko, yung subject ay too challenging, I will be really demotivated to accomplish the tasks, to accomplish works or school assignments given in that subject. On the other hand naman po, some students think that subjects are too easy. Alright, there are students who can learn advanced. There are students who are learning faster than other students, and therefore, if advanced learner yung student natin, therefore, for them, subjects will become too easy. They will be bored in terms of attending our subjects. Alright, teachers, you have to remember po that you should provide your students with challenging tasks, with challenging questions, all right? So that you can ignite their critical thinking skills in terms of your respective subjects. Okay? Another factor as to why students way back in distance learning feel demotivated is this what we call too high expectations. Okay? Too high expectations, most probably set by the family or by the parents, set by the teachers as well. Okay? Excessively high expectations can be a reason for students to become demotivated to study. All right, they can lead. Thus, too high expectations can lead to depression. Some of these expectations can lead to to depression among students, and consequently, negatively impact academic performance. Pag sobrang pressure po ang na-experience ng ating student teachers, lagi po nating tatandaan that that can have a negative impact in terms of their academic performance. So as teachers po, we should not impose too high expectations for our students. Okay, another is family circumstances. So sometimes naman po, the lack of motivation of our students has nothing to do with school or subjects. Sometimes family circumstances made them demotivated to study at all. Parents need to be aware that anything that affects them also affects their children. Okay, so as parents po, no, in terms of the family, one of the common scenarios na laging nakikita ng mga bata, nag-aaway yung parents, lagi nagsisigawan, may conflict, nawalan ng trabaho yung isang parent, nawalan ng trabaho si mommy, nawalan ng trabaho si daddy. Okay, so those circumstances can have a negative impact in terms of their motivation to study or to pursue their academic performances. Okay? And for the last one, teachers, dito tayo medyo guilty, no? Too much workload. Sometimes po, no, hindi namamalayan ng teachers na sobrang dami na po nating pinapagawa sa ating students. As teachers po, dapat we are sensitive, we are observant in terms of how much workload are we going to provide our students. Tandaan po natin, teachers, hindi lang po tayo ang subjects ng ating students. Okay? Hindi sila naka one-on-one sa atin. Lagi po nating tatandaan, they are enrolled in a lot of subjects. So therefore, we should avoid giving too much workload for them to balance their time in terms of accomplishing these tasks and responsibilities provided by the teachers. Okay. So once again, teachers, no, those are the different factors that greatly affected the motivation of our students during the online or the distance learning. Once again, these are the factors that we need to avoid as much as possible in order for us to avoid having students who are demotivated. As teachers po, no, we want to see our students interested and motivated to finish our course for the entire academic year or for the entire school year. All right. So since we have already talked about teachers, the different factors that made students demotivated during the distance learning, let's now discuss the different roles. Okay, reinforcing teachers' roles in hybrid learning. So ano nga po ba yung responsibilities and duties natin as an educator in terms of hybrid learning? Alright? Hybrid learning po shifts the teacher's role from knowledge provider to coach and mentor. So way back po in the traditional classroom setup teachers, tayo po ay tinatawag na knowledge provider. Tayo yung taga-provide ng knowledge sa ating students. But in terms of the hybrid learning, tayo na po ang coach and mentor. More like what I've mentioned a little earlier, student-driven po kasi itong tinatawag natin na hybrid learning. But this does not, this change in terms of our roles as teachers po, this does not mean that teachers play a passive or less important role in terms of the education of our students. Hence, sa reality po, it's quite the opposite. With hybrid learning, teachers can have an even more profound influence and effect on students' learning. So reinforcing teachers' roles in hybrid learning. So under this part for teachers, I will be discussing the do's and don'ts that you should observe in terms of hybrid learning so that you can ensure that hybrid learning is really happening inside your classrooms or inside your during your subjects or your classes. Okay, so let's start with the do's. The do's in terms of the teacher's roles and responsibilities in hybrid learning. Okay, do take it slow. Teachers, do take it slow. Like what I've mentioned a little earlier, this school year, this incoming school year po, we are in this what we call transition period from the distance learning to hybrid learning. For some teachers, hybrid learning may be a significant change. There is a significant change from their traditional learning methods or traditional teaching methods, rather. That's why it's critical to ease yourself and your students into new habits. Yung mga ginagawa po natin dati in the traditional classroom setup and the distance learning setup, they might not be applicable in terms of this hybrid learning. So you must look for other strategies and techniques that you are going to utilize for this approach. Okay? So, in terms of do take it slow teachers, once again, transition period po ito, wag po nating biglain yung ating mga students in terms of the setup of our class. Okay, paintindi natin sa kanila how does hybrid learning work? How does hybrid learning happen inside the classroom para po nang sa ganon, they are going to be well prepared in terms of attending your classes with this what we call hybrid learning approach. Okay, do take it slow. So another do's by the teachers is do check in with colleagues. Teachers, lagi po nating tatandaan, you can learn from your colleagues as well. You can ask them, ano yung routine na ginagawa nila in terms of their blended learning setup? Ano po yung mga approaches na kanilang ginagawa in terms of their blended learning setup? And those suggestions, those answers po that you can get from your colleagues or from your co-teachers po, you can utilize them in terms of your own classroom. You have to remember, it's useful to do routine check-ins with your colleagues about how blended or hybrid learning works in their respective classrooms so that you can see what is the most effective strategy for you to utilize. Okay? It's because once your students acclimate to hybrid learning, ask a colleague rather to observe your class for feedback on how to improve your instruction. Let's accept constructive criticisms and constructive feedbacks as well. Okay? It's because lahat tayo teachers, lahat tayo ay bago sa setup na hybrid learning. Therefore, we can commit some mistakes. We can commit some things that we should not have done or we should not do. So check in with your colleagues. Wag po nating isasara yung ating mga pintuan at ang ating mga windows in terms of their comments and suggestions on how can we improve our blended or hybrid learning setup. So do check in with our colleagues. All right. Another do's that you should observe teachers, do get feedback from students. So sometimes, no, let's admit it or not, teachers, dito tayo medyo allergic. Ayaw nating makarinig ng feedback, ayaw nating makarinig ng comments from our students. But reality check tayo, teachers. These feedbacks or comments or suggestions from our students, these things can help us improve our way of teaching in this hybrid learning setup. Okay? In a classroom setup, teachers, meron tayong mga tinatawag na extrovert students, meron tayong tinatawag na introvert students. For extrovert students, yes, they will be very vocal in terms of their comments, their feedback with your lessons or your lectures, but introvert students will be too shy or they will be too hesitant to speak their mind. Okay, so to get a full picture of how students are experiencing hybrid learning, you can create a you can create some strategies or you can conduct some, let's say, surveys. You can ask some questions to see how students perceive this, what we call um, parang blend in terms of the online setup and the face-to-face classroom setup. And of course, ask them for suggestions. How do they want to deliver to be the lectures or the lessons to be delivered? Because kapag tinanong natin sila kung paano nila gustong ma-deliver yung lesson, pwedeng it will pique their interest. It will get their interest for them to become more active in terms of our classes. So to get more insights from your students, you can ask open-ended questions to let students elaborate their own experiences. Once again, teachers, let's not be allergic. Wag po nating iwasan ang feedback na makukuha natin sa ating students. Okay, so after getting feedback, another do's that we should observe as an educator for this what we call hybrid learning setup is do learn and model computer skills. Whether we like it or not, teachers, this is a part of our training as an educator. This is a part of the new setup that we have in terms of delivering instructions or delivering lectures to our students. Learn and model computer skills. It's because digital skills are a key component of hybrid learning. Teachers, wag po nating iwasan na mag-seek ng new knowledge in terms of technologies, in terms of how to create presentations, how to create interactive classes, so that we can pick the interest of our students. We can maintain the motivation of our students. So once again, teachers, let's try to learn and model computer skills because some of our students are not that well adept. They are not well knowledgeable in terms of the use of technology. And of course, as the teacher po, kayo yung isa sa nakaka-assist sa mga students na hindi ganoon ka-knowledgeable in terms of using gadgets, entering the meeting room, submitting their requirements, etc. and etc. So do learn and model computer skills. Okay. After the do's, teachers, no. So let's now discuss the don'ts. Teachers, don't forget the value of experiential learning. Once again, don't forget the value of experiential learning. Hybrid learning does not have to be confined within the four walls of the classroom or the walls of at-home practice. Some of the most memorable learning experiences of our students can be a result of the different activities that we are providing them. It can be a result of the different programs or the different experiences we let them experience as our students. Okay? So we should provide some activities, teachers, na paano ba natin sasabihin? Dapat po tayo as teachers, we provide activities that will surely or that will ensure that they will learn through their experiences. They will learn through the activity. Hindi na po tayo knowledge providers. Okay, coach and mentor na po tayo. So dapat we let our students learn things on their own with this hybrid learning. We facilitate the learning. We make sure that they will learn through the different activities, the various activities that we will be providing them through this what we call hybrid learning. Okay. Another don't for teachers. Don't expect all students to reach goals at the same time. All of us are different. Lagi niyo pong tatandaan, teachers, all of us are different. So as our students, what one strategy that we have used in terms of our one class might not be suitable for this class. One strategy or technique that we used for our another class might not be suitable for this class. Lagi po nating tatandaan, ang mga students po natin, meron silang iba't ibang multiple intelligences. Meron po silang iba't ibang learning styles. So as teachers, one of the most valuable aspects, lagi po natin tatandaan ito teachers, one of the most valuable aspects of hybrid learning is its ability to reach all students. And remember that not all students will progress at the same time. So moving forward with hybrid learning in your classroom may require some patience until all students get accustomed of the variety of materials and access points. Once all of your students learned the lesson, that's the right time for you to move forward with this hybrid learning. Okay? When you stick with this hybrid learning approaches, your students will have more opportunities to design large group, small group, independent activities that will help them learn at their appropriate level. At ito po yung tinatawag natin na experiential learning. Okay, kapag nakita ng students na conducive yung environment for them to become independent in terms of learning, sila na po mismo yung magkukusa for them to reach the goals that they want to reach as a student. So once again, don't expect all students to reach goals at the same time. All right? And another don't for teachers is that don't forget to connect with parents and or guardians. So even if you have just started the what we call this the hybrid learning curriculum and are excited about how students will engage with your strategies or with your approaches, remember to connect with parents as you would normally during the traditional or face-to-face classroom setup, and explain to them why are you going to use these approaches? Why are you going to use these strategies for the hybrid learning? Okay, another thing po, no, connecting with parents and or guardians will also be helpful in terms of providing feedback with the performance of the respective students. You have to remember, may mga times na nasa bahay yung ating students. So therefore, they must be governed or they must be guided by their respective parents para po nang sa ganon ay ma-ensure pa rin that they can follow um, the goals that they have set for themselves, the objectives that we want to achieve in terms of our lessons and lectures. So don't forget to connect with parents and or guardians. All right, and of course, the very last don't teachers, don't underestimate the power of peer learning. Once again, don't underestimate the power of peer learning. Hybrid learning teachers is more than just setting students in front of computers and leaving them to their own devices. It's about combining various formats, various strategies or techniques, and opportunities to learn, and one of which is peer learning. Okay, so peer learning is very much a part of that. Students can be great teachers to their fellow students, and their teaching abilities increase when they can practice skills at their own pace while interacting with their friends. So if we think that this student can mentor another student, kapag itong isang student ay hindi masyadong follow up in terms of our lessons or lectures, therefore we can tap the student to mentor the student. So as easy as that. We can also utilize this what we call peer learning through this hybrid learning. Let's not close the box na tayo lang po ang pwedeng magturo sa ating mga students. We can also make them realize that their peers can also teach them the lessons that they want to learn inside the classroom. So once again, those are the do's and don'ts teachers in terms of your roles and responsibilities as an educator in terms of this hybrid learning. All right. So for the last part of our webinar today, teachers, we have to ask ourselves, how do we help our students develop a healthy mindset amid the pandemic? Once again, how do we help our students develop a healthy mindset amid the Okay, teacher. So as an educator, one of our goal is for our students, for them to have a healthy mindset amidst this pandemic and especially amidst this hybrid learning. And of course, I have mentioned this a lot of times already. We are not that yet familiar in terms of this hybrid learning. So lahat po tayo ay nangangapa. What more? Our students. So as teachers po, we should help them develop a healthy mindset in amidst of this pandemic and this hybrid learning. Okay, so how do we do that? So you have to remember, teachers, it's normal to have negative thoughts that pop into our minds, especially in the midst of this pandemic. When we simply accept the original negative thoughts and believe them as being true, our anxiety grows. Instead, by practicing balanced and accurate ways of thinking, we can create more healthy thoughts and in turn calm our emotional reaction. Teachers, lagi po nating tatandaan, no? As educators, as facilitators of learning, hindi po natin afford, we cannot afford to see one of our students being consumed by negative thoughts. Instead, we should help them see the positive thing in terms of that negative thought so that that negative thought can into a positive thing and a positive behavior. Okay? Kasi kapag negative po yung thinking ng student natin in terms of what is happening during the hybrid learning setup, alright, definitely negative thought equates to negative behavior. Okay, so kung medyo negative yung thought ni student, no, negative din yung kanya magiging behavior. Unpleasant yung kanya magiging behavior. And therefore, as educators, we want to see pleasant behaviors from our students. We do not want them to suffer because of the stresses brought by this hybrid learning setup. Therefore, as teachers, we can help them overcome those stressors by being there for them. All right, being there for them, helping them, assisting them, changing their negative thoughts into a healthy thought. All right. And in terms of that, teachers, this I will be flashing some tips in terms of how can we help our students to have a healthy mindset amidst this challenging times. Okay, so we have six, meron po tayong six tips for us or for our students to take care of their health, to have a healthy mindset in terms of the stressors brought upon by this hybrid learning amidst the pandemic. Number one is staying positive. Okay? Work on a balance between positive and negative emotions. Staying positive doesn't mean that you never feel negative emotions. You never feel negative emotions such as sadness, anger, anxiousness, worry. You need to feel them so that you can move through difficult situations. Okay, they can help you to respond to a problem. If you're a positive person, they can help, this being positive can help you respond to a problem, but you don't want those emotions to take over. So stay positive. We should instill to our minds of our students that they should be positive in terms of this hybrid learning setup. Okay, second, the second one is, um yeah, know when to stop. Know when to stop. Take a break from negative information. Nowadays, no, a lot of our students or a lot of us are consumed by this negative news that we can see every day. The increase in terms of the prices of our basic commodities, the non-stop increase of the price of the fuel, okay? The anxiousness of the people not knowing what will happen tomorrow. So take a break from negative information. Know when to stop watching or reading the news. Because if you keep on seeing negative information and provided by the media, that can affect your mindset as an individual. Alright, so we can say to our students that they must know when to stop watching or reading the news. Okay, use social media to reach out for support and feel connected to others, but don't fall for fake news. Okay, once again, teachers, don't fall for fake news, don't get into arguments, or don't negatively compare your life to others because that can destroy your healthy mindset. And of course, I have mentioned this a little earlier. Our students are at the most vulnerable stage of their development. So therefore, one how do we say this? One offensive comment can really hurt their personality, can really hurt their characteristic as an individual. So we have to ask them, know when to stop falling into the trap of this fake news. All right. Third is practice gratitude. When practicing gratitude for teachers, we can ask our students to do this because this can help them see life differently. All right. Make a point of noticing things that they are thankful for. Some students or some people find it helpful to keep a gratitude journal where they write down the things that they are grateful for every day. This can be big things, this can be little things. So they can have or they can practice gratitude for everything that they are receiving as a blessing in terms of their lives. Okay, in that way po, that can help them to have or to keep a healthy mindset. All right, fourth, take care of your physical health because, like what I've mentioned, your physical health also equates to your mental health, and therefore, physical and mental health are connected with each other. Get of plenty exercise, eat healthy diet, although this is cliche, you know, medyo cliche na po yung eat healthy diet, drink enough glasses of water in a day, get enough sleep. So those are the things po that we can tell our students in terms of physical health. All right, connect with others. So strong, once again, connect with others. Strong, healthy relationships with others can improve our mindset in life. This could include spending time with your family members, spending time or going out with your friends, volunteering in an organization, joining clubs and other groups. So these days, a lot of socializing happen online. Okay, but um, because of what I have mentioned a little earlier, some improvements in terms of the number of cases of COVID-19, we can now have face-to-face gathering. So connect with other people. Don't close yourself in terms of communicating with other people. If you need help, ask for help from family and friends. Such as if you're experiencing some problems, if you're experiencing some issues, you have to reach out to other people as well. Okay, and of course, the very last one for teachers, develop coping techniques. So in terms of developing coping techniques rather, you have to practice some strategies and approaches that you can utilize whenever you are experiencing some problems, whenever you're experiencing some issues. Many people also find their attitude is more positive if they practice meditation, which is a mind and body practice where you learn to focus your attention and awareness. Okay? So as teachers po, no, actually hindi lang po ito pang students, no? As teachers, we can also practice this so that we can have a healthy mind and the hybrid learning this pandemic. So teachers, stay positive. Know when to stop falling into the trap of false information that's found in media. Okay? Practice gratitude. Take care of your physical health. Also, teachers, connect with others. Talk with others. Have networks, teachers. Okay? And of course, develop coping techniques. So those are the ways on how we can ask our students or we can tell our students to have a healthy mindset. So once again, this is not just applicable for our students, teachers, this is also very much applicable to all of you. Okay, and with that being said for teachers, I would like to close this webinar. Okay, I would like to close this webinar with this quote. mental health matters. We should support mental health because indeed it is serious, especially in this time of pandemic. Huwag po nating i-brush off ang mental health concerns, whether it may be of our family members, most especially of our students. Okay? This concern should not only be the responsibility of our government, but of the whole community. It is therefore critical for mental health concerns and issues to be given additional attention and more space in the national strategy and response to COVID-19. Okay? It is the compassion, understanding, level headedness, commitment, and self discipline of every Filipino, and simply looking out of each other that will make a difference in the continuing fight against the COVID 19 virus in the days to come. Okay, as teachers, we should be very much aware of the importance of mental health because we as teachers can also experience mental health problems. What more of our students? Okay, so this has been a webinar that that is very timely for all of us. So I hope that you teachers were able to learn something in terms of this webinar. So I hope that you were able to get some insights and you will be able to apply all of the learnings that you have learned through this webinar in real life situations set up once you are already in the classroom for hybrid learning. Okay, so once again, teachers, thank you for learning. Thank you for listening and thank you for attending this webinar. Okay, so these are my references for this webinar. Once again, thank you and God bless us all.
There we have it. In behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this indeed very eye-opening and timely learning session. It is an honor to have you with us today, sir. And to all our capable viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. Don't forget to register to get your e-certificate of participation. We also encourage you to subscribe and watch on our official Vival Facebook and YouTube channel. Muli, maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat.